It's more or less the topic for today's lecture. We're definitely not going to be able to answer that in a theological way as members of a religious group, but what we're going to ask as sociologists, what the heck does this mean? Why did this occur? This magazine cover, and what is this referring to? So here we are today. It is Tuesday, February 17th, 2009. Here is the quick overview for you of today's lecture. Going to say a few words about the midterm. Going to introduce secularization theory by referring to the Time magazine article you read. Going to go in detail about what sociologists say about the theory, give a summary, and then talk about what's coming up next. So let's get right to the midterm. Please go online and look at the news section of D2L. You can basically find everything I'm about to say you can find right there. I've posted a review sheet. Reminder that the midterm is next Tuesday. It's 75 minutes long. You'll have true and false questions, multiple choice questions, a mandatory essay, in other words, an essay that everybody will answer, and then I'll give you another essay question that you'll have 3 choices to choose from. That study sheet basically covers all the main concepts from the course that you should be expected to know for this midterm. And a good way to study is to look back at a lot of what you wrote, even have that next to you during the midterm so you can draw from that. Look at all the readings that we've gone through and try and pick the key concepts, the key messages, and the key readings too. That's important. As always, it's open book, open notebook. Do be sure though to study because an hour and 15 minutes goes really quick. If you're flipping through all your notes and books trying to figure out the answer, then you'll find yourself in trouble. So make sure to kind of do some studying ahead of time. And then the biggest of all is if you have questions, get them to me by Sunday, preferably Sunday morning. I'm going to do a lecture that's just a grab bag of your questions, assuming I get some. I'll post that Sunday night. And then if you have some last minute questions on Monday, if I have time to get to them, I will do so. So don't wait to the very end. As you know, my office hours on Tuesday. So if you send them to me on Monday, I'll try and get to them before the exam, but there's no guarantee. So instead, try and get them to me earlier. I'm offering this Sunday extra lecture as a way to kind of try and bring stuff together for you. Let's move right on to the topic of hand today. What we're talking about is what's called secularization theory. Secularization theory has been implicit within sociology really since its founding, and very importantly for really I would say great portions, maybe the middle third or even the middle half of last century really was one of the key topics of study, especially within the sub-discipline of sociology of religion. And this article from Time magazine is what I used to intro this because I think it catches a lot of what's going on. So this is published, the printout, I deleted the date here, but 1966 I think it was. So imagine sitting ho-hum, here I am in Cold War United States in my home in Indiana. I subscribe to Time magazine because I'm an intellectual, and this is what arrived in my mailbox that week. Now this is not your typical Time magazine cover story, now is it? But this is a fascinating story, and what I gave you today was written 43 years ago, and it encapsulates a cultural moment in the United States, but more importantly for our purposes gives us a little bit of an easy entree in to what the heck secularization is about. Now place yourself for a moment in the 1960s. Actually, before we place yourself right now and ponder these questions I'm about to ask you. When you're sick, who do most people go to for healing? Note that I did not say who do you go for medical care because that would have revealed the answer too quickly, but who do most people go to for healing? A doctor, of course. Now, this question, have you ever heard people say, I'm spiritual, not religious? Next question, do most companies, when hiring, ask for a resume or a statement of your religious beliefs? And finally, do you know anyone that has an interreligious marriage? Your answers to all of these, here we are in the 21st century, are probably 180 degrees different than they would have been 150 years ago. These are all examples of places in our lives and our society where religion doesn't seem to matter. It possibly in an earlier era mattered a lot more for all of those answers. You may have one point of time gone to a faith healer when you were sick. At once upon a time, nobody said, I'm not spiritual, I'm religious. Instead, they all said, I'm religious, I'm this certain religion. Once upon a time, for a lot of companies and even in the public sector, there were either overt or kind of indirect religious tests. What religious group did you belong to before we're going to hire you? And then finally, once upon a time, it was even illegal in some places basically to have interreligious marriages. So things have changed, and that's what secularization theory is about, is posing, asking the question, have things changed in regard to religion? And if they have, what has changed and what does that mean? Now, thinking about this Time magazine article, place yourself for a second in the 1960s. All right, there's a lot going on culturally. We have civil rights protests, the women's liberation movement. There's a war in Vietnam going on, not to mention the Cold War, the world divided into two ideological blocks, godless, atheist, communist, if you will, and God-fearing capitalists, free marketers on the other side. This is just kind of a broad brush picture of what was going on socially at the time. And this picture comes along. And this article, now the article is fascinating because it covers a broad range of topics, and it has to do with this question. Really, instead of is God dead, for our purposes the question is, where is religion in society, and where is religion going to be in society? In the article we have a quote from a famous Holocaust survivor who's afraid God might be dead, because the question is, how could something like the Holocaust have happened? We have a famous anthropologist, Claude Levi-Strauss, who in this article, he says, well, God's dead because I have other ways of explaining the world around me. And then we even have a famous Roman Catholic priest, John Courtney Murray, who says, well, God's dead for a lot of people because they have complex, busy lives and they can't be bothered with going to religious services. And then if you read closely in the article, you can ask, well, what's the evidence that these people give and that the author gives in the article for why God is dead, or for our purposes, why religion seems to be removed from society? Well, the author says that 1/2 the world is under totalitarianism and believes in these atheistic philosophies of communism. The author mentions that people are moving towards psychiatry to answer life's deep questions, or drugs to escape the pain of life. The author mentions this doctrine of the anonymous Christian. This is something very popular in the 1950s as a way of explaining to Christians how good people could do good things without being Christian. And they developed this idea that, well, maybe they're kind of an anonymous Christian, and so therefore it's not really important that you believe in this Christian God, just as long as you do good things. So in this article, we're seeing all these kind of pieces of evidence, if you will, for the people at that time of what's going on with religion. And if you read closely, the article suggests some causes. One of them supposedly is bad theology. You have these guys, literally men, in medieval times sitting around in these beautiful Gothic cathedral buildings writing about an omnipotent God who controls all and therefore would let nothing bad happen. But now, 1960s, clearly that image of the God no longer suffices because all sorts of bad things have happened. And to top it off, those cathedrals are now empty. Europeans by the 1960s are already starting to decline in religious attendance and on measures of belief. So these people in this article are saying, whoa, what's going on here? The people in the article, the authors mentioned, well, there's new currents of thought over the last couple of hundred years. We've had the Enlightenment, we've had Karl Marx, we've had Copernicus, all of which have had the effect of shifting or decentering religious ideas from the main currents of our thoughts and even in our education system. And then we hear throughout this article that people now take scientific reasoning and ideas kind of as second nature. It's just the way we think. It's the era or the epoch of humanity that we're in, where scientific reasoning is just the default way of reasoning. Now let me make a couple of comments. So I've said a number of things about what the article's saying. Let me make a couple of comments as a sociologist